Is that not possible? Well, it's good.
It's good. It's very, very good. It's very good.
And Salon 1999 is the last vintage for Salon for the 20th century. Only 37 vintage in one century. It's unique in Champagne, but it's also unique in the wine world. There are no other example for a estate, for a chateau, with only 37 vintage. But why Salon is so special? Because we produce only when the vintage is a great vintage. And in Champagne it's not easy to produce a vintage because the climate in Champagne is very, very difficult. Very cold winter, very hot summer, and the spring is very often very cold also. And the quantity and the grapes available during the harvest are the selection. We must be very careful about the selection during the harvest. And for Salon it's very simple, in fact, because for one century we produce the same wine. We produce the same wine from the same vineyard in Le Mesnil. All the grapes are Chardonnay grapes from Le Mesnil-sur-Oger, a very small village in the middle of the Côte des Blancs, and Côte des Blancs is the part for the Chardonnay. And we produce only one the vintage. We consider this vintage like a great vintage. And the 1999 is the last vintage of last century. In the last 40 years, in the 60s we produced only 4 vintage. In the 70s it's only 4 vintage. In the 80s is the same, 4 vintage in the 80s, and 5 vintage in the 90s. 90, 95, 96, and 97, and finally the 99. 99 was a very mature vintage, a very rich vintage, with abundant grapes in 1999, and this wine is very. My definition of this wine, of this vintage, is the sophistication, very sophisticated, natural sophistication, rich and still young. The nose is beautiful nose of white flower and white fruit, touch of bitter almond, and the color is still with a green touch hints. Of course, very tiny bubbles, but for a great champagne, for a good champagne, we need tiny bubbles. Very complex, it's like a teenager, adolescent. And today the match with the fish and it's my first taste with Salon, honestly. Because in many places people said, oh yes, Salon, we must eat with Salon truffle or maybe caviar, some very expensive food. But no, today it's very, I don't know if it's expensive or not, but it's very simple, and I love this type of concept. Very exclusive wine with simple or not simple, popular food, because food is never simple. Food is good or not good, and popular or not. And I think it's really it's like maybe the pot-au-feu in France. This type of food is very popular food. I don't want to speak too much. You are all specialists, professional for wine, and please enjoy the Salon 1999. It's very new. It's the first tasting in the world, except 1 month ago in Singapore, where I taste with at the Raffles Hotel this vintage with Chateau Margaux and Chateau Yquem. We were all together for 1 week It was a week of food, lunch and dinner and tasting every day for 1 week. But you are the first people in Europe and before America and before China to drink this vintage. Thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch.
Do you think
Wine. The more serious the wine, the more settled on the food. The biggest problem is, you do lots of things that are nice fish and chips in Leicester Square. Many years.
hot over would be the equivalent? What do you think?
No.